Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my page 112 tag video for May 2023. Just rolling through this year. So the page 112 tag was created by Sean the Book Maniac. He based it off of a French literary prize wherein they comprised the long list of said prize solely by reading page 112 of the books in contention. The books are all novels, I believe, and page 112 would fall somewhere in the middle of most novels. And the thinking is that it's after all of the hyper-edited pages that, authors and editors put together in the beginning of the book. So you get to the real gritty writing and, the talent of it. And you also have no context for the rest of the story, so you can only judge the work based on the quality of the writing on that page. I have been using this tag since the beginning of COVID to whittle down my physical unread shelves as I also build them back up again. I have this handy dandy books and cats mug. It has all of these pieces of folded paper in it of books I acquired in 2022 or before. I pick out 3 of these each month at random, like that. I then read the pages aloud with you and discuss their merits and ultimately choose one of them to add to my month's TBR. And so it's my version of a TBR game. I really enjoy it. And without further ado, let's get started. So starting with book number 1. Alrighty, these always stick together and I try to unstick them, but you can only do what you can do with so many pieces of paper in here. But okay, this is one title. Oh, Unspeakable Things by Kathleen Spivak. This is not a 2022 release, so this is not a 2022 acquisition, which is exciting for me because for the last few months I've definitely only been getting, or mostly been getting 2022 acquisitions, but I'm sure I got this a little earlier, a couple years earlier maybe, probably from my library used bookstore. And this is Jewish fiction. It might be Holocaust fiction. And I would have heard about it from the Jewish Book Council site. And off the top of my head, I'm not sure if I've played with this one in a game before or not. If I did, it's exciting because I have less post-production to do now, but we'll just have to see. Okay, now going for book number 2. I always hope for a little bit of variety, but the truth is a lot of my books are kind of similar literary fiction, a lot of them with Jewish content, some of them without, so we'll just have to see here. Okay, you are one book. In the Land of Israel by Amos Oz. So yeah, this is somewhat different. This is nonfiction. And I know I have played with this one before, so I guess we're getting to that point where I've picked out enough of my 2022 acquisitions that now we're moving backward again. So this is definitely Jewish-related nonfiction where back in the 80s, Amos Oz, who was a famous Israeli writer, went around the country to sort of gauge how citizens felt about what was going on, like how they were living their lives, and their relationship to the broader country. So yeah. And finally, book number 3. Not sure exactly what to hope for. I mean, I guess something of not Jewish content would be okay now because I have enough of the Jewish content. It is Jewish American Heritage Month though, although I'm not sure if either of those books are about American Jews, so maybe an American Jewish book would be nice, but we'll just have to see. Okay. Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia. So this is not Jewish related, and we are in fact back to 2022 acquisitions. I got this Well, actually, at my used library book sale, but it was at a book festival rather than at like a storefront. So it was at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, which happened about a year ago now. So yeah, this is about a Latin American family, if I remember correctly. And I've not played with it before on this tag because, you know, it's a new acquisition. So we'll have to see how it does. Okay, you've seen me grab all three of these books. I'm actually going to read them to myself first to kind of get a handle on them, and then I will be back to share with you, so stay tuned. Okay, I'm back, and I'm starting with book number 1, Unspeakable Things by Kathleen Spivak, which indeed I've read several times by now for this page 112 tag, and I keep seeming to forget about it, but here we go. As they tripped in single file, the men rubbed their hands in anticipation. "Here we are, my darlings," sang out the first violinist, as he had every lunchtime for 15 years. But silence greeted them. The kitchen was tidy and cold, no pots bubbling merrily on the stove, and the enamel kitchen table was unadorned. No tablecloth, no deep white bowls awaiting soup and gratitude. Nothing. The kitchen stood bare and clean and cheerless. Bewildered, the 4 men looked at one another. What was this? What was this terrible void? "Where are you, my little dumplings?" the men sang out, as if playing a little game of hide and seek. They tiptoed around the room into the pantry. "Where are you, our little mice, our dearest ones, our little strudels, our sweet little legs of lamb?" But there was no answer. Clasping their hands in front of them, the men coaxed, come out, little darlings. Are you hiding from us, silly ones? Oh, come here, our succulent pork chops, our sugar buns." Again, nothing but cold silence greeted them. "Now, my dearest ones, be reasonable," said the first violinist, trying a sterner note. "You know it is lunchtime, and we must eat. This is enough of joking." Still no answer. The men looked at one another. Their eyes widened, and they began to feel frightened. "Come now, our Kuchen, this has gone on long enough." The cold kitchen gave no answer, and the instruments waiting in the parlor were silent also. A vacancy filled the house. So this one definitely had some strengths and was lent by the fact, surely, that it's the end of a chapter. And my assumption is that Spivak is building up suspense because, you know, she wants the reader to start the next one. So we're in this location where these men come home for lunch, it seems, and are expected to be greeted by people. I would assume children, given the nicknames. But the children are nowhere to be found, and they just keep on getting met with this silence. That being said, I feel like she went overboard with some of these foodie nicknames. I think it like detracted from the suspense after a while. I'm just like, whoa, this is ridiculous. And though perhaps she was like trying to convey, you know, that when people get nervous, they tend to overspeak, I think, you know, to fill that anxiety up with something like, you know, where are you? Where are you? I can't find you, so I'm going to keep talking until I find you, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I guess that's what I'm assuming for that, but I don't think it quite landed. But still, you know, it's engaging enough. I'm certainly looking forward to getting to this, but this is certainly not one of the books I will be angsting about in this next section. Book number 2 is In the Land of Israel by Amos Oz. We were hoping to avoid a confrontation and to allow the Rabin Perez government to save face. We figured that, as far as this particular area was concerned, we might succeed in stretching the Labor Party territorial doctrine, you know, what they call consolidating Greater Jerusalem, by a slightly broader interpretation. And we also managed to exploit the split between Yitzhak Rabin and Shimon Peres. The political echelon informed us, the answer to your request to remain in this area is negative. But the regional army commander has received an order to ignore you altogether, not to remove you, and not to aid you in any way. I suppose they thought we'd cave in on our own and save them an evacuation by force. When our people heard this announcement late one night at the military administration building in Ramallah, we immediately broke out the cognac and drank a toast with the military commanders. That same night, they drove us back to Ofra by military vehicle because they didn't want anything to happen to us along the way. At that very moment, the order from the top not to aid us was breached. Later on, to prevent any Arab assault on Ofra, they passed on some spare weapons to certain settlements, and they passed them on to us. The highest level turned a blind eye. The position of the Rabin government was, at the least, ambivalent toward us. Why, once when we went to a meeting with Rabin, the director of his office told us that we were Perez's baby, and that therefore we shouldn't expect any help from Rabin. But Rabin didn't get in our way much either. The military in the area helped us a lot. Shimon Peres helped a lot. At least once a month he'd come personally to visit us and see how we were doing. Okay, this one's a tough one in a few ways. It's a very controversial subject. Also, this entire page 112 was part of one single paragraph that started, I assume, maybe hopefully on page 111, not earlier, and ended on page 113. So it's not exactly the cleanest, easiest writing to follow, and we're obviously in the middle of a situation that a lot of context would be helpful. I mean, I realize this tag is about assessing the value of the writing on the page, but certainly in terms of discussing a controversial nonfiction issue, such as what is certainly the settlements, is what Amos Oz is talking about, it would be nice to have more context. And I am surprised, though. I mean, certainly what it seems like from this page, he seemed more than okay with being in the settlements, like, celebrating that the Israeli government more or less wasn't enforcing the rules to evacuate them. There's also a little bit in here about fractions between the Labor Party government, between the two major rulers, Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin. And this is certainly, it's a different time for Yitzhak Rabin too, at least given this page where he was mostly okay with what was happening, because later on he was, famous for trying to broker a peace deal. So yeah, I definitely still want to read this book. I'm wary about assessing its quality based on just on this one page, basically. I really don't think this fits the tag well because of, the subject matter being as, fraught as it is, and also the writing, just that it's this rambly, dense paragraph that goes on and on. So I don't think I'll be reading this now because it's a topic I think I'd want to choose with more care to read about, because it is such a fraught one. So I don't think that's in the cards for me anyway, and I don't think it fulfills page 112 anyway either, as being, a good, the strongest anyway, page 112. So I feel more okay in letting this one go. For now. And finally, book number 3, the only one I haven't read before, is Of Women in Salt by Gabriela Garcia. So here I go. Starting a little bit on page 111 and going a little to page 113, but this book is kind of small, so I guess that's okay. So anyway, the previous muchacha had started working in a kitchen when she was 8 years old after her father died. As a girl, she had been able to buy shoes for all her sisters, and this had been a source of great pride. Anna heard her tell Gloria this story before the woman left her post to marry. "I want to work too," Anna had said to Doña Nancy some years back. Nancy had said no, but agreed to give Anna an allowance for helping her mother. Plus, Anna wasn't going to school. Gloria taught her with books Nancy brought home from the middle school where she taught English. So Anna was working, but she wasn't. It was all very confusing. She spent all her time around adults. And then there's a break. Nancy liked everything really, really hot. She liked a quesadilla that could set off a smoke alarm when you unfolded the tortilla. She liked her soup still bubbling in the bowl. If you served Nancy food and it wasn't scorching hot, Nancy would frown and then she'd get up and microwave her plate. So Anna charred everything, skirted burning every meal. She often scorched her fingers taking plates to the dinner table. You learned these kinds of things about people, their habits, their eccentricities, when you worked for them. Anna knew Nancy better than Nancy's own husband, who sometimes sought Anna's advice over a birthday gift or anniversary plan, which her mother thought was an outrageous thing to ask a child. Sometimes he'd even ask Anna about Nancy's schedule. For instance, Roberto probably didn't notice that Nancy never wiped her feet on the bath mat when she got out of the shower, instead leaving a trail of watery footprints that required listening for the turn of the faucet, then opening the bathroom door so Anna could be ready with the mop. Roberto probably didn't know that Nancy smoked cigarettes sometimes when he was at work, and then hid them in the curtain of the upper right drawer of their shared wardrobe between the neat rows of panties Anna folded each week. Okay, so admittedly, I was a little confused. I read this a couple of times to try to understand what's going on, because there's a lot of name dumps and not a lot of associations about who's who to one another. But, well, my understanding from this page now is we are in a domestic situation where Doña Nancy and Roberto are, you know, the heads of the house, and they have a bunch of servants, I would assume, working for them. The first one we're introduced to is a young girl who started working very early in her life, it seems. She was called a muchacho. And she inspired Anna to start working young as well. And for whatever reason, even though apparently they had young help before, I guess, Nancy wasn't so keen on it. Except it seems like Anna, in fact, is doing a lot of work under the table, as it were, for this couple. And that her mother seems to also be a servant in the household. And that Anna herself isn't going to school and is being taught by, I assume, another servant, Gloria, maybe. And so, yeah, that's the relationships, as I can tell, between all of these people. And then it seems like Nancy, in a way, has the most characterization. Like, we learn how she likes her food. We learn all of the secrets that Anna knows about her that her husband doesn't, which makes me think that this woman is actually very involved with this little girl, you know, mostly, I guess, in a serving capacity. I'm not sure. So I felt like those details were kind of interesting, but the actual page was a little difficult to follow because of the relationship stuff, and that it's all, you know, narrative and... So, I mean, I found it intriguing. I'm definitely interested, but I do think I'm going to put this one down for now. Which is perhaps an interesting thing to say after I said iffy things about both of these books in my previous clips that I filmed in 2021. You know, technically speaking, speaking of things being out of context, of course I was referring to these books in comparison to other books that are no longer a part of the page 112 tag. And... the fact that I didn't choose them meant that I didn't think as highly of them at the time. But, you know, I do still think, you know, I'm stubborn, but also I have hope for both of these books. The one that I still am the most iffy on, I think, is not that one, it's this one. It's Unspeakable Things by Kathleen Spivak. I feel like it's my own bias how much I don't like all of the, you know, childish language, even though I totally understand in a way, like in context, it makes sense when people are scared that they would speak like this, but it just, I don't know, it makes it seem so juvenile in a way. I mean, I feel like I'm really overjudging this one aspect of the page, but I keep on, like, being iffy about that every time that I, you know, bring this book back to the page 112 tag. And of course it's also, I believe, Holocaust fiction, which, you know, isn't really related to the page 112 tag directly, but, you know, knowing that makes me think, oh, you have to be in a certain mindset. Of course, I find you also have to be in a certain mindset to perhaps read about Israel and to read nonfiction, and, you know, I, you know, talk a lot in that clip about feeling like this isn't right for the page 112 tag, but I don't know, methinks past me doth protest too much, maybe? Because... you know, going back on the actual words on the page, I feel like it was a very compelling read, even if it was just one paragraph or whatever. I just feel like the language is just very stark and very there. And so it's not necessarily that it's not page 112 tag material, except that it's a very different genre than most of the fiction I have on this tag. But it is a challenging read because this is about contentious issues. To be more specific than what I've said before, Amos Oz did reporting around Israel and the West Bank in the 80s, and then I think this is a reprint, so he gives sort of an addendum of his thoughts about 10 years later about sort of the state of things in Israel and the variety of people he interviewed and what it says about the politics of the land. And it's contentious, it's fraught. It also kind of goes with a lot of my reading this month. Like right now, for example, I'm reading a book that's at the top of my Goodreads TBR, which is by a Palestinian author, and it's a fictional novel about a family who'd been displaced twice by the Israeli wars, 48 and then 1967. And later in the month, I actually am hoping to also read another top of the Goodreads book, which is Israeli-American fiction about some Israelis and Americans living in Israel. And I'm also technically, for my maybe Midrash Readathon, reading a book by an Israeli group of women, although that might touch more on religious issues and less on current day affairs. I'm not sure, I guess I'll have to see, but Israel is featuring heavily in my reading. And in a way, I feel like this particular nonfiction book would tie things together in an interesting way, even if it's a little dated now, but it might be a good thing for me to do and to, stop being afraid of reading it. Of course, another thing that makes me anxious is that I am reading for the BookTube prize right now a bunch of other hard-hitting nonfiction that I have to get to before a deadline, but I think I can hopefully squeeze this one in. I guess I'm going to go for it, put myself out on the line here, and I'm officially choosing this book as my page 112 pick of the month. So that about covers it for me now, and you can find the Goodreads links for all of these books listed down below, as well as my own playlist for the TBR games I play, which is this game monthly, and then quarterly I play the BookTube spin as well. I definitely think of this as a TBR game because this is my way to try to be a little spontaneous month to month with my reading. Most of my reading is pre-planned well in advance, but anyway, another thing I like to do in these outros, since I consider myself a TBR gamer, is to shout out other booktubers who play TBR games or take part in readathons, that sort of thing. And this time I decided to shout out Daisy Ex Machina, which is a new name for this booktuber who used to go by the BookTube Goddess, and also bills herself, hopefully I'm using the right pronouns there, as the only BookTube drag queen, basically on BookTube. Yes, the only drag queen on BookTube. And her game is really fun. It's very specifically superficial. It's called Shove It or Shelve It, and it's about looking solely at the covers of a variety of science fiction and fantasy books, which are also in my wheelhouse, and choosing what she wants to read based on the covers. But anyway, another cool thing about this booktuber is apparently she and a guest host occasionally have done some US versus Israeli cover, like, match-offs to see which ones are better. And it's interesting for me because I read a lot of Israeli fiction in translation, so it's kind of coming in the opposite direction, that first it was published in Israel and then it was published in the US with a new cover. And in this case, I think most of the books are either from the US or classics from the UK, and then were ultimately published in Israel with new covers, so that was kind of fun. And I guess is my silly way of continuing to justify my own book choice for this month. So anyway, I will link to her playlist down below. I hope you are all enjoying your reading, however you come across it. Now that I've stacked up a bit of my own TBR, the next time you see me should hopefully be me talking about what I'm actually reading in my first Am Reading video of the month, which should be coming out in the next few days, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.